Jonathan E. Mord. He's practiced constitutional and administrative law in Washington, D.C. for 23 years. He's defeated, as you said, the FDA in federal court 6 times, which is more than any other attorney in America. He formerly served in the Reagan administration's Federal Communications Commission and was a vice president of the Cato Institute. He's the author of 3 books, including his latest, the one I have here, which is called The Rise of Tyranny: How Federal Agencies Abuse Power and Pose Risk to Your Life and Liberty. Jonathan, welcome from D.C. You said that corruption in government is pervasive, and I know that you told me when we sat down at a Chinese restaurant in Falls Church, Virginia, that the Bush government was for sale. Explain yourself.
Well, the government, unfortunately, is a victim of what's known as industry capture. The industry that is supposed to be regulated by the independent regulatory commissions largely controls those commissions. And this is a characteristic of regulation over time. James Buchanan won the Nobel Prize for essentially the theory of exposing this reality. The Bush administration has essentially had no control over the growth of the bureaucracy and has allowed individuals who are the heads of the bureaucratic agencies to get away with allowing industry to take over those agencies. And the effect has been devastating. In the case of the drug industry, it's been absolutely horrific. The Food and Drug Administration had this regime where they had a massive prior restraint, that is, total censorship on any nutrient-disease relationship claim, even if it's true. So, for example, if I say that prune juice is a treatment for chronic constipation, which I don't think anyone in the audience would disagree with that, and I don't think any scientist would disagree with that, that is illegal. If I put that on a prune juice bottle and I sell prune juice, that's illegal because the FDA has an absolute prior restraint even if the statement is true. Now, this raises profound First Amendment issues. In fact, not since the Star Chamber courts in England in the 14th century did you have such a draconian system of prior restraint in place. The First Amendment of the Constitution is designed to eliminate prior restraints. First and foremost, among those things that the First Amendment achieves is an elimination of prior restraints on speech. In fact, this wasn't even a controversy in England. The Blackstonian law that we inherited from England made it illegal to have a prior restraint like this. Well, here it is. The FDA is a massive prior restraint. So
How does the FDA get away with something like this? I'm unclear on that because you talk about constitutional issues. Tell us what this whole idea of separation of powers is all about and how it plays into what you're talking about here.
Well, since 1935, the Congress of the United States has delegated to over 182 independent regulatory commissions a combination of legislative, executive, and judicial power. What this means is that you, as the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, can create law by creating regulations, can enforce the law against those you accuse of violating it, and can judge the violation. So you are all-powerful in your sphere. Now, at the time of the founding of the Republic, one of the cornerstones of the American constitutional system is the notion of separation of powers. And James Madison, John Adams, Sam Adams, all of our founding fathers were committed to this notion that power, in order to avoid tyranny, power that is legislative, executive, and judicial has to be in separate power centers. Madison said that if ever any two of those three powers were co-located in a single person, that would be the very definition of tyranny, because the person could be the judge in the instance of the accusation.
And you're telling me now that the FDA and other regulatory agencies have all three?
Yes, they do. And so what has happened is that 3/4 of all laws made by the federal government are not made by our elected representatives, as the Constitution requires, but are enacted by unelected people who run the independent regulatory commission.
Well, surely, if I'm a congressman, I ought to be able to delegate that authority to the agency, yes?
Well, you have done it, but it's unconstitutional in the
Let's
sense
don't
of the
let a
Founding
little thing
Fathers.
like the Constitution get in our way. I'm talking about, I just say to them, you guys write the rules. Why would it be in my best interest as a congressman to do that, by the way?
Because you avoid responsibility and accountability for your actions. The great thing about doing that, if you're a member of Congress, and the reason why this happened, is that congressmen are constantly presented with controversial issues. And if they take a position, a strident position, on one side or the other of the controversial issue, they're going to alienate a significant part of the electorate. And they're going to risk re-election. And their objective is to constantly be re-elected, to make themselves permanent members of Congress. They love the jobs. And what happens is when they delegate this power away, they avoid making the tough choices, but they can take credit for the overall beneficial picture. For example, if I'm a member of Congress, I'll vote in favor of clean water or clean air, and I'll appropriate massive sums. But on the dirty business of shutting down the factories and putting people out of work, well, EPA will implement it with its regulations, and EPA will be responsible for that. And then, even though I voted for the appropriations bill, even though I delegated all this power to the agency, if a constituent writes to me and says, I'm upset with the EPA...
Yeah, I'm going to write it, I'm going to tell you that I'm mad about it, because I write my congressman, I'm mad about it. Now, they're going to represent me then, aren't they?
Well, you get the member of Congress who was initially responsible for delegating that power away, who understood by doing that he wasn't going to make the hard choices, who knows that the hard choices are causing you to be unemployed. And what does he do? You write me a letter, I'm a member of Congress, well, I'll either just send the letter to the agency, or I'll write a letter saying I'm upset about that, but it's of no legal consequence. The agency gets the letter, they say, oh, great, well, we'll respond to it in 4 months, and they don't do anything. Why? Because there's no power in this whole process. It's been delegated away. The governing power of the United States is in the hands of these unelected people, and they are making the laws. And this is a permanent government. This is an oligarchy, a bureaucratic oligarchy.
And correct me on this. Patient care is the, what, number 1 or number 2 leading cause of death in the United States?
Actually, it's number 3.
Number 3.
200,000 people die a year from doctors' mistakes.
Okay, number 3, the third cause of death in the United States then. This is significant, and this is something we need to have emblazoned in our minds as we tend to give our power away to these experts that are called doctors, that they kill 250,000 people a year. And it could be drug interactions because they simply don't know what the effects could be. It could result from problems in surgery. It could be negligence. It can be any number of things. But the point is, we really need to start questioning who these experts are. If they're they're the third leading cause of death in this country.
Oh, without question. To me, first of all, I'm an MD. MDs learn nothing about health. I had not 1 minute of nutrition in medical school, not 1 minute of structure in medical school, not 1 minute of health in medical school. The first year...
Of health?
Not 1 minute of health in medical school. All you're taught is disease management.
Disease management,
that's it.
Yeah.
And the cause of disease, you're not taught anything. First year, the normals. The second year, you have the diseases. I remember asking my professors, how did we get from a normal colon to colitis? And their answer was, don't ask questions, just read the book and put those answers down. Okay? And straightforward, how do you get from one to the other? Well,
so is it any surprise that so many people die under the care of someone who hasn't really been trained in wellness, the understanding of disease, the understanding of health, and secondly, or thirdly, the understanding of chronic disease? And this is an area where medicine really falls down. They really can't do a darn thing to, quote, cure it.
Outside of crisis medicine, they haven't cured one chronic disease in 100 years. In 1910, Rockefeller gave actually the power to the medical establishment. Since then, not one chronic disease in 100 years. Now, if your car's transmission failed and you went to the mechanic, and the mechanic said he never fixed the transmission in his life, A, would you leave the car there? Of course not. B, would you ask him his expert advice?
No.
Well, why do we do that with the MDs? You know, and
yet we're completely brainwashed in the Western world to trust only our doctor. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. The book now, Medical Conspiracy in America, that you've printed, that's available freely online for anybody to see what the system is, how it's actually rigged. We need to start exploring how it is that people doing really fine work in healing and actually curing chronic diseases in the 19th century, the 20th century, were literally run out of business by the AMA just to begin that story. And look at how this has progressed in your own story. This is about your own story, because you exemplify how this is managed to the point where we don't trust anyone except a classic MD doing allopathic medicine. This is totally by design.
It's brainwashing. I call it Orwellian propaganda. All you hear on the news every night, experts say this, experts say that. If you're a failure for 100 years, how can you be an expert?
Right.
Okay, and all we're doing, they remind me, medicine today reminds me of the moron that lost a quarter on dark night and is looking 2 blocks down the street because that's where the street lamp is.
One of the things that really intrigued me within that was that there was a propaganda department. Tell us about the AMA, the propaganda department, and Dr. Arthur Kemp. How did this whole thing begin?
Well, you know, first of all, there are 5 licensed healthcare professionals in the state of California. You got MDs, osteopaths, chiropractors, naturopaths, and acupuncturists. The only one that organized, 1847, the AMA organized. They wanted to control the system. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know that, Kent, but I do know that they set up a propaganda system. Okay, and that's exactly so much of what we got is a propaganda system. Every night on TV, you see experts say this, experts say that. You got pharmaceutical commercials telling you, go to see your doctor this, go to tell your doctor that. It's a brainwashing. It's a constant brainwashing. MDs know nothing about health. Zero. Again, the cure rate is 0. The United States is 37th in the world in healthcare and longevity. Okay, what makes us so good? We're such a failure. In 100 years, you think someone will wake up. But I once had, you know, I look for the truth. And to me, my oath is to the patient.
Yes.
Okay, and I do my best. And I remember one case that I fixed. And I had charges brought against me by the Arizona Medical Board that I cured a person with an illegal means.
Yes.
I mean, think of that concept.
Yeah, no, I threw it.
But by the way, another thing that they want to do, look up Quackwatch in my name. Right on the front page, you'll see if they tape in I was censured, and to bring up the papers for illegible handwriting.
I saw that, illegible handwriting. So we've got in the middle of the 19th century, the AMA comes along. First of all, when the AMA organized, what were some of the effects of that in terms of the other areas of medicine that were licensed that you already spoke of? What happened?
What really happens is the effect of it really takes place in 1910 with Rockefeller. Okay, the germ theory of disease comes up in the mid-1800s by Pasteur. His rival said germs don't cause disease. Antoine Béchamp, they live in a diseased body. Pasteur on his deathbed recants and says he's wrong. However, though, if you have the germ theory disease, you can develop the magic bullet philosophy of therapy. Rockefeller in 1910 sponsors the medical establishment. In 1910, essentially, there are 5 professions, and they're all basically equal until Rockefeller steps in. He supports the medical establishment. All the other schools lose their charter. By 1947, Flower Fifth Avenue in New York is the last one that becomes a medical school. It was a homeopathic school. John Rockefeller dies at the age of 97, a vegetarian all his life, never taken a drug into his mouth, and a homeopathic physician in attendance.
Yeah, and this is a follow the money story. And we talked about this in the last interview. Follow the money.
It's all money.
They made massive amounts of money in the pharmaceutical industry. So Rockefeller, when he intervened and started funding, in essence, medical schools, the other schools were essentially shut down.
They were all shut down. They were all shut down. They all lost their charters, and that was basically it. And they all became secondary by the propaganda.
By the propaganda, because by this time we're looking at some collusion between governmental agencies as the decades progressed, and also with the media and the funding of advertising for the media, which comes directly from these same institutions and these same mega corporations and media associations, all in bed together.
That's all media control. Pharmaceutical industries makes a fortune. During our bad economy, the pharmaceutical industry is increasing. Go to a drugstore. That's the only place with lines. And all of these drugs that they give you, realize they're all poisons, okay? There's no such thing as a side effect. That makes it sound like it may not happen. It's a direct effect. So you will have those negative effects if you're taking a poison. And now the average person is taking 5 to 7 a day because every specialist is giving someone a different
and
poison.
no one knows what the other one is giving them. There's no real management in terms of contraindications of all these drugs people are taking.
There is no discussion. Doctors do not talk to it. The pulmonologist doesn't talk to the cardiologist, and they may be in the same office, each one giving different medicines.
That's dangerous. That's irresponsible.
It's so dangerous. It's so scary out there. Again, no such thing as a side effect. These are direct effects that are negative, and they are poisons.